My Place in Canadian History by Gabby Cohen. My story begins in Morocco, North Africa, when Moshe ben Shushan, my great-grandfather, was born in 1885. He married my great-grandmother Miriam and became the final link of the ben Shushan name in my family. Together they had 4 children, including Eliza ben Shushan in 1926, who was my grandmother. My great-grandparents, along with my grandmother Eliza, moved to Israel around the 1940s to establish a better life. At the time, there was no freedom for other cultures, including Judaism. In Eastern Europe, before the 19th century, there were violent attacks on Jewish neighborhoods, known as the pogroms, that took place in the Russian Empire around 1881. Jews fled from Eastern Europe to many places in Canada in that period, from 1880 to the beginning of World War I, as refugees. In Western Europe, around 1760, during the French and Indian War, the first group of Jews who were soldiers in the British Army set foot in Canada. The first Jewish settlement in that same year made up of Jewish officers, soldiers, merchants, and fur traders from Western Europe who immigrated in response to the gold rush on the west coast. After the British gained control of Montreal on September 8, 1760, a small Jewish population remained in the area, and then, in the mid-1800s, Jews from Western and Central Europe established small communities in Hamilton, Kingston, and Toronto. After getting attacked for being Jewish, my great-grandparents fled to Israel for freedom, to practice their religion and escape religious persecution. It was in those years my grandmother Eliza ben Shushan grew up as a woman and met Chaim Cohen in Israel around 1945 and got married. Together they had 10 children. One of their sons, named Eli, was my father. He grew up at the end of World War II, that brought the largest population movement in European history. At the end of the 18th century, 80% of the Jewish population lived in Russian, Austro-Hungarian, or German empires. However, after the Holocaust and the outrage of Hitler and the Nazis, hundreds of thousands of Jews, survivors of the genocide, left to secure homes beyond their native lands. Surviving Jews of the genocide initially became refugees when they were not welcome in their own homes, and fled westward hoping to find a place in North America. European states were too preoccupied with the sufferings of their own citizens and the reconstruction of their own country at the time, which led to the refugees fleeing westwards for better opportunities in Canada. Surprisingly, Canada only accepted 5,000 Jewish refugees in the 1930s, sending the St. Louis back to German concentration camps despite Jews trying to flee the threat of the Holocaust in World War II and the Nazis. One factor that was thought to have denied Jewish entry into Canada before the Holocaust was the impact of the Great Depression. The 1930s brought misery to Canadians as low wages and high rates of unemployment became normal. After World War II, another problem for Jews was that Canada did not have a refugee policy, meaning that Jewish refugees at the time were still expected to show how they could support themselves in Canada, despite the fact of them fleeing Europe due to oppression. Additionally, the widespread anti-Semitism laws for immigration into Canada caused social exclusion. This could be due to the predominant Catholic religion, as well as the threat to Catholic values within people of the country. Anyways, after many years of waiting for acceptance into Canada, my father finally left Israel in 1995 to start a new life in the Western world. My father came to Canada for better economic opportunities as there was a news of plentiful jobs, and it was just in time for serving his last war, the Yom Kippur War, in 1973. He left to take a break from the war zone as well, serving in the army and fighting 2 wars in 1973 and 1982 for Israel. One important historical moment that affected my family's settlement in Canada during the late 19th century was the Multiculturalism Act that was passed in 1972. The Canadian Multiculturalism Act, which was passed by Pierre Trudeau, promoted the full and equal participation of individuals and communities of all origins in the continuing evolution for Canadian society. This affected my dad's decision on settling in Canada because this new act, along with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, made him feel welcomed into the country, especially considering my family's past hardships with anti-Semitic views based on their different religion and cultural beliefs. My father did not consider settling into any other country besides Canada because he already had family connections set up here and felt more comfortable if there was others he could lean on for help. However, some challenges he faced when he first arrived was cultural shock. The Western world was very new to him, very different from Middle Eastern life, and he found learning and interacting with others in English to be very difficult. Independence was hard too, especially because most of his family connections here in Canada left from a drastic change in culture. He needed to start his new life on his own, and this was his biggest challenge yet. But my dad did not give up on the Western world and the new opportunities that awaited him. He started studying English, going to school here, and working hard to familiarize himself with the English language and learning the new ways of life in a more Canadian world. He embraced Canadian culture, getting involved within the community, and started ballroom dancing. He also began teaching ballroom dancing lessons for a couple of years, making the effort to really put himself out there and meet new people. But life was not just going to be easy in Canada, just because there was freedom and peace within the country. When my dad opened his first business, Canadian Gift Concept, in 1995, he built a foundation for himself and the family he was going to have in the future. In April of 2000, I was born into the world, and my dad and my mom moved in together by the time I was about 8. However, in 2008, the stock market crash of Canada brought devastation to my dad's business. Sales dropped 70% in just half a year, and there were many financial problems that arose, impacting himself and his employees. 2008 was not a very good year for Canada. People had no source of income coming in and didn't have the money to spend it on things like stores, which was essential for my dad's sales and business. His team was willing to give up 25% of their salary so that they could survive the year in hopes of not going bankrupt. At the end of the year, things started looking up. Businesses were back up and running, and my dad and his business were back on track to success. And at the end of the year, it came with a huge surprise of my little sister being born on the very last day of 2008. Looking back on my family tree, it took quite a while for the first generation of my family to get to Canada. I believe that this was because my great-grandparents lived a much different life in the Middle East versus people from other countries in Europe. My ancestors did not want to come to Canada initially because of religious beliefs. As Jewish people, they wanted to stay in their promised land, which was for the Jews given by God. My dad's siblings attempted to settle in Canada around 1995 before he immigrated, but could not survive the drastic changes in culture, the Western world, and how different it was from their life back in Israel. It was much less peaceful and quiet, which made them intimidated when they came here. Lastly, because my great-grandparents and my grandparents were originally from Morocco, it was much easier for them to feel safer practicing their religion in a country where the majority of the Jewish people were, rather than coming to a new country that they didn't know much about. This is probably why my dad was the first one in my family tree that brought the Cohen family name to Canada, where our family of 6 lives happily here in Thornhill, Ontario. All in all, my family withstood many unfortunate occurrences, including anti-Semitism in Europe, the Holocaust, and 2 European wars. However, regardless of misfortunes, if it were not for my great-grandparents fleeing religious persecution to Israel, and then my father adjusting his new life all on his own here in Canada, I would not be here today. And although the very first generation of my family in Canada began with my dad, our family tree will still continue to grow. I, being one of the children and the generation of today, will assist in continuing the growth of my family tree. One way that I'm already contributing to Canadian history is by running the Terry Fox Run each year. By participating in the Terry Fox Run, I would have helped share Terry's example of courage, strength, and hope he once fulfilled for others in this country. Terry Fox often said that it was the youth who would carry forth his efforts and work towards a world without cancer. Millions of students across Canada, including me, take part in the Terry Fox National School Run Day every year, raising funds for cancer research, making it one of the largest fundraising events in Canadian history and one of the largest displays of solidarity this planet has ever seen. By contributing to Canada, no matter what profession I may choose, I will be making my mark in this world and my place in Canadian history.